I'm Bob Durkin, President of the Greater Scranton Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of our Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural Skills 2020 Workforce Resource Summit. Tonight's program is brought to you by Skills in Scranton, the Chamber's workforce development affiliate. The goal of our summit is to raise the awareness of the employment resources available to job seekers and the business community, furthering our mission of attracting, sustaining, and growing jobs and businesses here in Lackawanna County. In addition to our Zoom conference, we're currently live streaming this event on ECTV's YouTube channel. There will also be a recording available on the Chamber's website at www.scrantonchamber.com following the program. Your hosts for this evening are Jerry Mushno and Karen Clifford. Lastly, this event would not be possible without the generous support of our program sponsors. I'd like to thank them for their help in bringing this educational summit to the community. Let's take a moment to acknowledge them once more. And now let's get tonight's event underway.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jerry Mushno, and I'm the board chair of Skills in Scranton.
Hi, my name is Karen Clifford. I'm also a Skills in Scranton board member and the committee chair for tonight's Workforce Summit. It's no secret that finding a job or hiring qualified employees can be an extremely difficult task, especially in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. The time has come for all of us to turn over every rock in search of meaningful employment or dedicated skilled workers. Although this seems difficult, it doesn't have to be.
You're right, Karen. Gone are the days where employment barriers are blockades to the workforce. Tonight, we will walk you through the journeys of 8 job seekers with varying employment barriers. They will discuss how they overcame these issues to obtain meaningful employment with family-sustaining wages.
In addition, they will discuss the workforce resources available for employers to expand their talent pools and hire skilled workers just like them. You'll notice throughout the presentation that these resources will appear on the screen. Don't worry about writing all of them down, as a booklet of information will be available to you upon completion of the program at scrantonchamber.com. Tonight's topics are displaced and dislocated workers, individuals with disabilities, veterans, and previously incarcerated individuals.
First up is displaced and dislocated workers, a topic relevant now more than ever. COVID-19 has displaced and dislocated a number of workers in our region. Luckily, there are ample resources available to assist both employers and dislocated workers in this area. Let's hear from our presenters, Bill, Dorothy, and Chris, on how they overcame their unexpected layoffs.
Well, thank you all for joining us and allowing us here today. This panel was put together because of our unique situations in regards to being displaced or dislocated workers. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about our experiences, the services we utilized, advice for job seekers as well as employers, and hopefully we could kind of share the information that led us through our very different opportunities and very different challenges that we had. So before we get started, I'd just like to introduce myself and the panel. My name is Bill Burke. I'm the Vice President of Student and Academic Affairs at Johnson College.
Thank you, Bill. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Von Onen, and I'm Director of Employment Services with Goodwill Industries of Northeastern PA. We provide career services and digital literacy skill classes for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as people involved in the drug and alcohol and mental health courts of Lackawanna County.
And I'm Dorothy Grell. I'm a youth instructor at PA CareerLink Lackawanna County, where I work with 17 to 24-year-olds who are out of school, either to get their GED, advance in training, or get placed in the workforce.
Thank you, Dorothy and Chris. So to get started, because we do have really different paths between each of our situations, I'm just going to ask Chris, kind of tell us a little bit about the situation when you were dislocated, displaced, the services you utilized, and just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Bill. So I was working in the book publishing business prior to the last recession. And when the economy took a turn for the worse, I was laid off. And within 2 weeks of being laid off, I was also diagnosed with cancer. So what I thought was going to be a short-term unemployment turned into a 3-year gap in my resume history. So eventually I got to the point where I was feeling better and it was time to go back to work. And I thought, geez, I could do this. I have no problem. You know, I've always been successful on my own. So I went out with the strategy of going to all the job boards that were out there, Indeed, Career Builder, Monster, and I put together a resume and I just blasted it out there to anything that I was remotely qualified for. Well, needless to say, that was a very poor strategy and it didn't work well for me. So what happened was I ended up actually taking a step backwards and took a position with a local manufacturing company at a significant decrease in salary from where I was before. At that time, when I was job searching, I wasn't aware of all the services that were available in this area, CareerLink, EOC, your local college, if you go to their career placement. I didn't make use of the resources that were available. Some of them I didn't even know about. And needless to say, that strategy really wasn't the best.
Great, thanks, Chris. So coming from long-term unemployment and underemployment, Dorothy, you could kind of tell us about your situation too, kind of somewhat similar but still different.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I was a K through 5th special educator in a local school district when I became a displaced worker. Again, like Chris said, I felt like it was going to be a short-term unemployment because I had my master's degree. I thought I was on top of the world. Looking back, I was very naive and very arrogant in my thinking. So very similar to Chris, I didn't utilize the services. I thought I had the answer. After serving a 1.5 years on unemployment and having to take a major step back, I applied out of desperation because my funds were running out to a job where I was going to be an adjunct instructor for one class. It was a physical education class, but through the director giving me that chance, it did take 5 years before I was fully reemployed as a full-time worker in one location, of working part-time at different colleges and things like that.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that story. My story's a little bit different. I had an advance notice that my job was going to be closing, so probably a good 9 months ahead of time. And working for a career college, I was familiar with some of the services that were offered and some of the techniques that we kind of trained our students to use, whether it was networking and building those relationships within the community. But like kind of Chris mentioned, some of the services that were provided to us, the CareerLink provided the rapid response service to help those who maybe were displaced a little bit earlier. For myself, knowing that I had that 9-month span to really kind of look for work, I put all those skills into place that I learned while working at the school, networking, kind of getting my resume out there, talking to people that I knew, and actually landed the position I'm in because of a friend of mine recommended the position that I currently hold now. So I think whether or not you're long-term unemployed, underemployed, or you have advance notice, I think there's a lot of services and out there that job seekers and employers can recognize. So from my perspective as well, working for various different colleges, there's a lot of services that colleges could provide to employers who maybe are seeking, have an open in the workforce that they can't necessarily fill, as well as those who are either underemployed or unemployed long term. There is training opportunities available out there, whether it's funding through the Career Links or OVR, and then kind of tackling on some additional advice. I want to kind of touch base with both of you guys. And what advice would you guys have for job seekers or employers for dealing with dislocated workers based on your current experience and in your current positions? You guys both have a lot of experience with that. Chris, you want to start?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So I recently saw a little quote, and it said, "The hardest prison to escape is your own mind." And I really thought hard about that, and I put myself back to when I was a displaced worker, long-term displaced, and it was so true because I thought, I could do this myself, and I'm proud, I don't need help. Well, it doesn't hurt to have help. And I wish I had reached out to some of the resources that were out there. So, don't get locked in that mindset, I could do this myself or I don't need help. There's a lot of free services out there. One of the other things that I learned, and I knew this from publishing, but I didn't apply it in career search, was I used to do a lot of copy writing and a lot of editing. And so when I read something, I would read what I thought I put on the paper. I wouldn't notice the mistakes. So when I was sending my resumes out, they're loaded with mistakes, but I saw what was in my mind's eye, not what was actually on the computer monitor. So reach out, get that help, take your resume and, make several copies of it. Tailor it for the position you're applying for. And then the big tip, network, network, network. And everybody talks about networking. I know everybody, it kind of sounds funny. Oh, you've got to go to this cocktail party or you've got to go here or this event. But it could be as simple as a conversation with maybe, your child's softball coach or somebody you went to school with or a neighbor or a friend. Get out, ask those questions, have those conversations. You're going to find that there's stuff going on in your area, in your community that you don't even know about, and that conversation could be the key to bringing it to your attention.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And
You're
Dorothy,
welcome.
what advice would you give?
Definitely for the job seeker, like Chris said, don't try to do it on your own. There are services out there that will help. CareerLink, EOC both have trained counselors available to help you. Like Chris mentioned, have someone else look at that resume. Talk to people. No one likes to go to a networking event, especially when they're feeling down, but there are great resources in this area, such as NEPA networkers, the Chamber's events. Your college might be having young alumni mixers, things like that. Definitely get out there and network. Finally, I would say, definitely for the job seeker, look at the point of when you're out of work as a time to kind of give back to your community. So volunteering, because again, you never know where you're going to meet that next person that's going to make that next connection for you. And plus, it's additional skills that you can put on your resume that show that you were doing something while you were furiously looking for your next employment opportunity.
Yep, I think that's a great point. So I think networking is a big part of it. And Chris, you kind of mentioned it. I think some of the greatest networking, of course, can be done at networking mixers sponsored by the Chamber, but also on the bus. Walking through town, you kind of build those relationships. When it comes to other opportunities for job seekers, there's funding. There's funding that's available for some people to obtain training. I know colleges like Johnson College all the time work very closely with the career links to help those students, kind of match skills and with employers. So on the flip side, when it comes to employers, I know Dorothy had mentioned this in prior conversations, was don't look at that employment gap on somebody's resume as a red flag, right? You take a chance on somebody who has, either a gap in employment or who's underemployed, because those people sometimes are very, very hardworking and, very, very motivated to succeed. I think another big point for employers and industry professionals out there when looking for dislocated or displaced workers, one thing you can do is reach out to your local colleges or universities or trade schools and tell them what you're looking for as far as skills, because for the most part, colleges can customize a program that meets your needs and then work with the community, whether it's the CareerLink or other services, to provide funding for these individuals looking for those jobs. And then, kind of have that built-in relationship with those schools to provide feeders for that workforce to kind of, meet their demand and what they're looking for. So it's very customizable, and I think that's something that, maybe industry professionals aren't really aware is out there from colleges, but for the most part, they're ready and willing to, provide assistance any way they can. So I think that's definitely great advice from the panel here, and I think to kind of summarize and bring this all home, whether you're right out of high school or, lose your job after being on the job for 30 years, there are a number of services available within that community. Obviously, networking is something that, somebody who's been tenured and working out, it takes a long time to do, but I think it's a lot easier when you take advantage of those resources ahead of time and while you're also still employed. I think that's important. Getting involved, volunteering, all really good ways to network. in addition to community resources. I mean, if you're not sure where to go, start off at the chamber and ask them, or ask the career link. What services are available for each unique situation. So I think whether you're right out of high school, have some sort of disability, even re-entering the workforce from maybe incarcerated, there are services available to you, and it's just a matter of kind of opening up and seeing what's out there and really asking questions.
It is simply remarkable the way each speaker overcame their layoff using the community resources in their own ways.
Karen, there were so many resources jam-packed into that presentation. Their stories are relevant now more than ever during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Next, we will hear from Keith and Bob, who both have inspiring messages on how to overcome your disability to obtain the job you always wanted. Also, they have great tips for employers on how to successfully hire and onboard employees with disabilities.
Hello. My name is Keith Williams. I'm with my colleague Bob Fox. We're hoping that in the times that we have, that we want to be able to share some of our personal and our professional perspectives, both as people with disabilities and working with people with disabilities, so that you, future employers, the public in general, anyone involved in the hiring process or business community, will realize what a good idea it is to recruit, hire, and train people with disabilities to increase the diversity of your workforce and to modernize your workforce.
Hi, I'm work with Keith, as he mentioned, and we work for the Center for Independent Living in Scranton, MyCell. And I had a stroke when I was in my 20s. I was actually 5 days before my 27th birthday when I had a massive stroke. So it was a bit of a shock to me, as you can imagine. But after that, I came up with a plan for my future, and part of that was working. But before I could work, I had to get my degree, and that was also my plan. So I started out actually here at Lackawanna College, and I graduated in 2001 with an associate's degree in human services. And then I went on to Penn State Worthington at the time, Worthington Scranton campus, and I got my human development bachelor's degree. And I did my internship at the Center for Independent Living, and that was back in 2005. And I've been with them ever since. When it came to working, I needed some reasonable accommodations. And I decided to, well, actually what I did is I was finding that I was having a difficult time with typing, as you can imagine, using just one hand. So I went to my supervisor and said, I looked it up and they have one-handed keyboards. And so I mentioned it to her, and the cost was $99. So it wasn't that expensive. And a little bit of a learning curve for me to use, because there's all these different modes, as you can imagine. They split the alphabet in half, and then they split the numbers, and so. But it worked out for me. It really did. It allowed me to type faster. So.
And it gives you an idea of some of the accommodations that are available, and sometimes homemade ones are the best. And as Bob said, some of the most effective ones are the least expensive. In terms of my own situation, I have a congenital disability. It's what's called arthrogryposis. It's a neuromuscular disability. So as you can see, I basically don't walk, and I have limited upper body strength in my arms and very limited dexterity in my hands. But I've learned through trial and error the kinds of accommodations that work for me. It's funny, they talk about the road less traveled and how so many of us have a different career change down the road that we didn't expect. And that's true of me, but I'm glad that the turns worked out the way they did. I have my bachelor's degree in communications from King's College, and I have a master's in human resources administration from the University of Scranton. I was originally interested in getting into radio, hence the communications degree. I always had an interest in broadcasting, but I quickly realized that there were too many knobs, buttons, dials in the control room and the radio booth for broadcasting that was impractical for me. So I stayed in that major, got towards writing, and that's helped me in my career since at the Center for Independent Living. Where I'm the advocacy and outreach coordinator, working to promote compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the hiring of qualified people with disabilities in the workplace, and just general community advocacy and community education. I have a conventional desktop keyboard, mouse setup at work and at home, and I'm able to use a long dowel. It's just a simple 13, 14-inch piece of wood with a bit of rubber at the end of it, homemade from any of the do-it-yourself supply stores in the area, very common, and I just tap with my mouth. To kind of hear it, it seems somewhat crude, but I had a lot of practice doing it in college, and fortunately have been able to build up my speed and proficiency at using that, and surprisingly is even more accurate than using voice recognition. I've tried voice recognition. It works to a point, but then I would find myself editing and correcting some of the errors from voice recognition with the mouse stick. So for me, for expedience worth, I just use that all the way through. I use a little wooden block that someone at our employer, the Center for Independent Living, cut for me to put the platform, to put the keyboard on that, so I don't have to bend down as far as typing. These are very common accommodations that are available and used both throughout Pennsylvania and nationally. And I think it's also important to note that we're in human services. Obviously, we're with people with disabilities, working with people with disabilities, and we have disabilities ourselves. But if there's one thing that I think that's important and can't be stressed too strongly, can't be overemphasized, is the need to refrain from typecasting or pigeonholing people with disabilities. So just because somebody may have a disability of some kind that's readily apparent, or whether it's not, but they talk about having a disability themselves, I don't believe that that person should automatically be typecasted, and the assumption should be made that they're only going to be working with people with disabilities. We all have interests. We all have diverse interests, some the same, some different from everybody else. And provided that the person is qualified, whether or not they need some kind of a reasonable accommodation, that person should be considered for the job that they are interested in applying for.
So with that in mind, I'd like to mention just a couple things, a couple acronyms that are affiliated with folks with disabilities working. The Department of Labor has a very good website that provides a lot of information for employers. And if you go to their disability resources and then hiring individuals with disabilities page, you'll find all this information that I'm about to mention. I've just picked out a couple things that I've used before, but one acronym is EARN. And that service helps individuals who are, HR individuals, helping to recruit and hire and maintain folks with disabilities in the workplace. And then another one is called JAN, which is the Job Accommodation Network. And they provide expert help for employers looking for accommodations for certain types of disabilities. I mean, you go into their website, they break it down by disability. And so it'll give you an idea. You can't pigeonhole that person that they have spinal bifida. This is the issue, but it'll give you a general idea of what they may be dealing with. Okay, and then another one is OVR, or the Pennsylvania OVR. OVR stands for the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and they are a state agency that helps individuals find employment. And they come in to help that person if there is a barrier to employment. I forgot to mention earlier, but I used OVR services when I first had the stroke. They literally had someone in my room at Allied Services within a couple of days of me going there, being admitted there. So that started my journey with them, and they helped me to go to school and then find a job. So. But they have a new component to what they do, which is a business services rep. And every district office in the Commonwealth has one. And all you have to do is reach out to that person if they haven't tried to reach out to you yet. And it's a great person to be in touch with, because they want to hire folks with disabilities. I know you want to hire folks with disabilities. So it's a good connection to have. But two things also that I want to mention. There are 2 tax credits that are available for employers. The first one is the work opportunity tax credit, and that is for certain targeted populations the business can get tax credits if they hire that person. One of them is referrals from vocational rehabilitation. Okay. The second one is the disabled access program, or tax credit, which is a $5,000 non-refundable tax credit. But that, in its name, access, it provides access for folks with disabilities to be able to work in that environment wherever they get a job. So it could be, for example, someone who needs interpreters, or if there's architectural work that needs to be done in the office in order to provide a ramp for that person, that is there for that person.
I think if somebody with a disability who I was talking to, even if it wasn't the same as mine, but just having a disability in general, asked about advice or what they should do when they're ready to go out there and start looking for work, is I would say to be persistent. And obviously that's something that we might hear anybody say to give advice with or without a disability. But sometimes, and everybody is a little bit different, but for some people with disabilities, they've often not even had the opportunity to be interviewed, let alone start the job. Whether it's a lack of the perception that they lack experience or the capability. And again, these are just some people. Others are able to get interviews right away or on a list just as somebody without a disability. But I think persistence will eventually pay off. And if you're talented in a certain area, you want to build on that experience, and you can increase the diversity of that workplace. I think that with a little faith and believing in yourself and that persistence, it will eventually pay off.
One thing I have noticed in working with consumers in the last number of years is when it comes to employment and interviewing, that they lack the confidence. And that's one thing that I really work with individuals on is, to be confident. Just because you have a disability, doesn't mean you have to, not have any confidence. I mean, that's a big part of it in any interview, is how you carry yourself. and show that you are interested in the job and that you can do the job.
If an employer asked me for advice in terms of hiring somebody with a disability, and someone is seated opposite their desk or in their work area, their cubicle or office space, boardroom, what have you, and doing an interview, I wouldn't go so far as to say pretend that the disability isn't there if it's readily apparent. I'm saying in the case that you can see it, because obviously you can't ignore the disability. My advice would be is it's okay to acknowledge someone has a disability, but look beyond it. Don't let that be the elephant in the room. Don't let the disability be the overriding concern in the front of your mind as you're asking questions to that job applicant, the same questions that you would ask to everybody else. Don't presuppose. Don't be thinking to yourself, well, he has a disability. I'm wondering if he can do this job because I know that the tasks and the essential functions and responsibility are A, B, C, D, E. Go in there with an open mind. It's okay to see the disability. Just make sure that you see the person and their abilities during the interview process.
That's a great point. That is a great point. And I guess I can look at my personal situation and say, if you looked on paper, I mean, and you heard that I had a massive stroke, well, you have certain ideas that, oh, this person can't do this, they can't do that, you know. But when you get to know me and you realize that, well, maybe he can do a lot of these things, you know. So that's the whole idea, is to, I mean, we know that you can't ask someone about their disability, especially in an interview or anything like that. But if look at that, and if it's a disability like mine that comes along for the ride, that's what I tell people, right? So I walk in the room, well, you know, Keith and I, we can't hide our disabilities,
Right.
okay? This is part of who we are. But give that person a chance in the interview. Ask them questions, you know, related to the position and what you think they can do and all that. Have a good conversation, you know, and then make your decision based on, you know, what is required of the job.
I couldn't agree more with Bob and Keith. That is such a powerful message. We must overcome our personal and professional stigmas to see the employee's skills and abilities and not just their disability.
Agreed. Everyone deserves a chance to show what they're capable of. And that is a similar message to what we will hear from James and Jennifer in our next presentation on previously incarcerated individuals. Jerry, let's jump right in.
My name is Jennifer Shoemaker. I'm the program manager for the Lead Center at Outreach, formerly EOTC. The overview of the typical individual we serve is someone who has incarceration on their record. We typically work over at Lackawanna County Prison, where we meet someone, and then our hope is to follow them up with them at the Outreach Center. Once they come to the Outreach Center, we're able to get a clear picture of some of the barriers they have that are working against them when released. So some of the barriers that we work with is transportation, housing, and educational setbacks. And we meet with the person where they're at and try to develop a strategic plan on how we can come up with a plan of action in order to get them employed and then sustaining themselves individually. People change. I think that's one of the biggest parts of our mission, is that we meet people where they're at and we understand that they can change. And we have a great relationship with those people, and I find I'm very lucky to be able to meet people where they're at and help them move in their direction in life. So this leads me into the part where I've met James.
Well, my name's Jameson Jarris. I was incarcerated in October 27th, 2018, and I was locked up for 16 months for drug-related charges. I've been using drugs since I was 15 years old. I'm 33 now. Uh, I'm in recovery, and I started using meth when I was real young, and it got progressively worse. Uh, Led me down a really bad path. Got caught up, got a federal indictment, and then I went to prison. And I had the pleasure of meeting everybody at Outreach. I started going to classes, just trying to get into a routine at prison, and it was uh, it was the best thing I could ever done to get my life back on track. Well, the main reason I signed up for classes was to get off the block. It was I just wanted to get out of there, and then I realized how beneficial the classes could be. One of the first classes was a health and wellness class. Just it's a lot of basics, but it I needed that. I needed that structure back in my life. I needed to get that I don't know, I just needed to get my life restructured and get back on track, and you helped me out a lot with that.
So that's kind of where outreach steps in. That initial meet and greet, we get to meet somebody where they're at, like I said, when they're incarcerated. No judgment, no jokes, just let's get to know each other and let's say where we're at and how we can help you. James just wanted to be part of something, and part of something bigger than a jail cell, or part of something bigger than someone who's has a drug addiction issue, and somebody who just wanted to be something bigger for himself and his family. So a little bit of background on James. James, what's a little bit of your background too, as far as not only job experience, but educationally, if you want to share?
Sure. I went to Elk Lake Senior High School. I was in the VOTEC program for food management for 4 years, and then from there, I went to Pennsylvania College of Technology. I got my bachelor's degree in culinary arts, my associate's degree in hospitality management. I did 8 years in the military as a cook as well, and I own a food truck, and I have for the past 7 years. But I'm in a kitchen now, and which is great because that's what I love to do. And I'm also at a custom butchering place.
Whoever would have thought, most people's viewpoints, that somebody with those credentials and that experience in education is in jail. That's who's in jail. And so I knew we had to get our work together and figure out a good place. And part of my responsibility too is because I get to know people so well, I can also get an understanding of what is going to be a healthy environment to get this person a job, and what job's going to be healthy for them, because a job is a job, but not all jobs are healthy. So we did a little homework, and I had a friend that was part of a meal prep program that delivered pre-made meals to people that were primarily into the fitness community. I knew likely that was going to be a pretty healthy environment to send someone who has had, substance use issues and who's trying to stay away from any negativity. So what we did at the Lead Center, which is what I do for everybody, is we did a resume right on the spot. Our resume was going to showcase James's educational experience, work history, veteran experience, and we were able to get together that resume for you. I think we did some mock interviews, which we do at Outreach as well, and I think we addressed the main issue, which is going to come up, and it's like the elephant in the room, but we can't hide from it, is when somebody asks you, do you have a criminal record?
I went into the interview. He looked at my resume. He liked it. He asked me flat out, what were your charges? And I told him they were drug related. And he's like, okay, you're hired. And he hired me right on the spot. I went in there with the confidence, though, that I wanted that job.
And with James's experience, it was a pretty easy sell. I mean, we have somebody with years of experience, not only in the food preparation industry, but management industry. And
so
then
can I
yeah.
chime in? So one of the things I had, one of the trials I had to go through was, what about transportation? What am I gonna? These are like some of the barriers I had to deal with. Job searching. I mean, we hit the nose on the head with the job search. But as far as transportation and getting there,
And I think you were not familiar with the area as well.
No, and we sat down and we looked at Colts,
The bus, yes.
Colts bus service, public transportation. I was just walking everywhere, and I was living at the halfway house at the time. I had to spend a couple months there, and we sat down. We looked over the bus schedule. She gave me some bus passes, and then I just started using the bus. And then I eventually got my license back, and I started driving to work.
And I will say James doesn't give himself enough credit because all within, a week or two, you secured your driver's license back. You got your Social Security card back in the mail. What would you like to tell employers? What would you like them to think differently if they're interviewing somebody with a criminal history? Like, how do you want them to look at someone rather than just, okay, check a box?
Look at them as a person, like give them that respect, to give them a chance, because you don't know what you're gonna find. I could have been anybody off the street, but they gave me a chance, and they that's what I would say to them. We're people too. Yeah. I messed up big in my life for a lot of years, but now I know I'm the James I need to be.
Yeah.
And that's what excites me every day. I wake up and wake up sober, and it's a great feeling. And I think there's a lot of other people out there that want that same opportunity. They just need to be given that chance.
Yeah, I agree. Some words of advice for employers is to really just treat somebody as an individual and give second chances. Everybody's capable and willing of change, and we're a big believer at Outreach that someone's already paid the price. They've already did their time. So to have to continue to re-victimize somebody in a way with just limiting them from an employment option it's just not fair. And I mean, we have quality employees with great skills that just happen to have something on their record.
So Tom, the another counselor, he was teaching us one day in class about federal bonding, and it's where people who are incarcerated can get employment at certain jobs and be federally bonded, and it's kind of like an insurance policy for them to take them on. I wasn't a part of that, but I mean, there are definitely jobs out there that would require that. I don't know if
100%. So the federal bonding, just like James said, it's open to many people, not just people that have been incarcerated, but also individuals with substance use disorder, veterans, gaps in history. And then there's also the federal tax credit, which is also, again, an incentive for employers that if they were to take somebody that had an incarceration, they would actually receive a tax credit at the end of the year. So there's incentives to employers, and to no fault of their own, they're not aware of these incentives. And luckily, they have people like myself and James now, who's like an ambassador for this. We're able to speak with employers and give them that information. Provide them with a little insight, and a lot of times then a little feeling of, maybe a little sense of well-being then. Again, not to say something's going to happen, but sometimes when you have something put in place, it helps people feel a little bit more, relaxed when it comes to taking on an individual, maybe for their first time, who has incarceration. And it, I think, helps open the door to many other people. My advice I would give to a job seeker reentering is be motivated, never give up, stay positive, and really believe that you have the skills that the next person in line has for that job. There's no question, there's no doubt. Just believe in your qualities, believe in, your resume, sell yourself, and just be you. I think most people present best in an interview if they're just genuine. Your genuine self is usually the most believable self, and it's actually the most appreciated self. So I always tell people, just go in, be honest, be vulnerable. And most times there's a relatability to the person interviewing from the employer. They probably have experienced that themselves in their own family. So I think the genuineness and just being open and honest is one of the biggest, positives someone can do when they're reentering. Own it. You have to own. We own our scars, we own our flaws, and we own our possibilities. Everybody deserves a second chance. hear their story, look at their skills, look at their capabilities. And I always say to employers when I do talk to them, normally if you're giving a person with an incarceration a second chance and you're giving them an opportunity to work for you, they'll be your best worker you've ever had, because they understand that there's obstacles against them and that there's judgment. And normally somebody who, understands those things, they're going to be going the extra mile, and they will do everything that they can to learn new things, do new things, work all the shifts that somebody else maybe doesn't want to work, just because, they want to show that they are this person, not the person that was, in jail a year ago.
James worked so hard to better himself and become a role model for similar job seekers. It's great that his employer gave him the chance he deserved and found a hardworking, dedicated employee to further their business mission.
Absolutely. And last but not least, let's hear from Eric's experience as a veteran returning to the workforce after serving our country. We'll also hear from Jennifer about the resources for employers and how to hire and onboard veterans.
Hi, my name is Eric Darling. I'm a veteran. And today we're going to talk about some things that involve veterans, but we're also going to talk about what a veteran actually is, because a veteran isn't just one thing. So as I talk, I'm probably going to be focusing more so on employers because it's important for you to understand what you're dealing with, because I know that you're looking for that labor force, and veterans can definitely be some of that labor force.
So my name's Jennifer Spetler. I work with the Pennsylvania Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. I did not serve in the military, but my father served 22 years in the Air Force, so we moved a lot, and I got to experience firsthand as an Air Force brat when your father leaves service after similar experience to Eric for the first time, what it's like to transition into a civilian life.
So as I said, my name is Eric Darling. I am a veteran. I served in the military for altogether 30 years. 20 of that was active. I have one combat tour, and I've had lots of experiences there. Those experiences have brought me to where I am today. I am the executive director of an organization called Valhalla Veteran Services, and we provide counseling for free to those people that are dumb enough to run towards danger while everybody else runs away. Now, you're going to find that when you deal with veterans, our humor may be a little bit different, and sometimes it's a bit abrasive, and that's something that we have to learn to deal with. But when I say to other veterans that you are dumb enough to run towards danger while others run away, they think that's funny, although you may not. So, as far as employment goes, one of the first things to understand is, what is a veteran? I know that when I say the word veteran, and those words come out of my mouth, you form an idea in your brain that's probably been formed over a long time with lots of experiences of what a veteran might be. So for you, that image, that archetype in your mind might be that a veteran is someone who is between 25 and 30 years old, has a beard, and maybe you think that person is totally broken because of their experiences. When I say veteran, you might think of an archetype of something like a Vietnam-aged person, a person who is 75 years old. Again, you might think of them, perhaps, that they're broken, that they have been through a very hard time. So those ideas that you have about a veteran are produced because of experiences and information that you've received over the years, but they may not actually be true. So let me give you two variations of what a veteran is. Now, I told you, for instance, that I served for 30 years and retired from the Army. So I'm a little bit different than a 25-year-old who served for 4 years. So my enculturation in the military has been much deeper. So in many ways, it's far more difficult for me to relate to this world than it might be for someone who is 25 years old. I also have many experiences in the military that someone that's 25 years old and spent 4 years in the military has not had. So when you're talking about a veteran population as a group of people that you might want to bring into your labor force, you need to understand that there's a wide variance of who we are. So what I would suggest to you is try to deal with those archetypes in your mind and be willing to look at the human being that's sitting in front of you as a single individual, because all of our experiences are very different. I also want to deal with stigma. Well, let me go back for just a second. So that 25-year-old, if you have in your mind that he's broken, if you have in your mind that he has gone or she has gone through experiences that have created problems for them, you may be totally wrong, because what you might actually be dealing with is a person that, although they didn't go to college, they have real life experience in leadership and many transferable skills that you may not know about. Now, here's the problem you're going to run into with that 25-year-old, is when you start doing your interview process, they might start talking like Dwight from The Office because they're nervous. Remember that you, as an employer, make them nervous. And so when they get nervous, they revert to the way that we trained them, and they start doing things that are familiar to them. And so they start using lingo that you don't understand. It's perfectly all right for you to ask, what does that mean? They're going to use lots of acronyms, and it's okay for you to stop them and say, I don't understand you. Can you please tell me what that means? And if you listen carefully, what you may find is that they're giving you pertinent information that will help you and your company to use them as a valuable resource. So that 25-year-old, by that time he's 25 years old, and let's say they've spent 4 to 6 years in the military, they have real-world experience in leadership. They have real-world experience in the job that they did, which they will refer to as their MOS or their billet. Again, terminology that does not translate from the military world to the civilian world. But you as an employer, if you want that asset, because I'm trying to let you know that that veteran is an asset to you. He can make money for you, which, let's face it, at the end of the day, that's the important thing. This is a person who can be a very valuable resource, but it's going to take a little bit of effort on your part to understand what they're trying to tell you. So that 25-year-old has real-world leadership ability. Now, I'm going to give you a weakness too. They're not as patient as the people that you're used to dealing with in the workplace. Some of the problems that 25-year-old is going to face is that he or she actually believes that there are rules that need to be followed. And so when they see a person that shows up late and they see a person that doesn't put their whole effort into a job, they get frustrated. But let's turn that. Isn't that exactly the type of person you want to hire? Aren't you looking for someone that's loyal? Somebody that's actually gone through hard things and come out of it on the other side, and I'll even say that they've come out of it on the other side stronger. Now let's talk about my crowd, the crowd that's a little older, the retiree. You know, one of the difficulties I had when I started looking for a job, because I looked for a job when I came out of the military. By the way, I have a master's degree in counseling. So I don't fit the bill of what many have an archetype in their mind, that I'm uneducated. I had a bachelor's degree 15 years ago. And that was actually part of Army education, that they want us to be more educated. So my last assignment in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard, I was full-time there. I was the senior human resources sergeant for a local unit here in Wilkes-Barre. And what that meant was I had complete responsibility for the payroll, for the administration, for all of the EO, sexual harassment, all of those classes. I had complete responsibility for all of the HR operations of a group of about 400 people. So as I'm going through this resume, the person that I'm sitting with is saying to me, Eric, I hear what you're telling me. It sounds like you were pretty much the equivalent of a vice president of HR for a 400-man company. And I would say, no, I was not. I was the senior human resources sergeant. Because to me, that felt like a lie, if I were to say that I were the vice president of that. It took lots of back and forth with me and that individual. And honestly, I don't know if I ever ended up putting vice president on there, because I really never was a vice president, but my level of responsibility was really at that level. So getting a service member or a retiree to translate that experience is very difficult. And understanding that there is a huge difference between that 25-year-old who, in my mind, is a far better hire than a person right out of college, and the difference between somebody like me that's a retiree that probably had responsibility equivalent somewhere in the realm of your executive level. You got to be able to split those things in your mind. So when I went out into the world and I started looking for jobs, now remember, I just retired after 30 years combined service from the military, and I have this brand new fresh master's degree from a counseling, from a school, and I go out and I start looking for jobs, and they tell me that they would like to hire me for $15 an hour, and that they want me to work with juveniles or whatever else, and that I have a supervisor who's 20 years old. Well, probably 26. You know, that's kind of insulting. Part of my journey has been understanding that my experience doesn't translate to your world evenly. I understand now that the education, the certificates, all those things are needed. Sometimes they're just simply legal requirements. But for you as an employer, I would like to ask that you take a risk when you're looking at veterans, because we're very different than what you think, and it's not always the fact that we're broken. And that, by the way, brings me to another thing. One of the biggest things that I think we have to overcome as veterans in getting employment is the idea that we are broken. The reality is some of us are. Some of us really can't function because of the experiences we've had. And by the way, sometimes it's not experiences through the military, but things that happened before that. But some of us are exactly what you want. We're strong, we're educated, and we have experiences that have made us stronger through the experience.
And more of what I wanted to speak to is really just to veterans and in part to employers, particular to employers, and following up on what Eric had said. I think he hit the nail on the head in that, you know, there are some strong attributes that veterans have regardless of age, but because of their experience in the armed forces, they've seen a lot more and taken on a lot of responsibility and come out on the harder end of that experience that most college kids have not ever had to manage on their own. And I'm telling you from firsthand experience as a college graduate and going out into the workforce. But I think, you know, with that in hand for employers, I encourage you to ask on your applications, on your website, did you serve in the armed forces? Because that's the beginning of a gateway to understanding who you're talking to, and really can flourish a person in that interview. What I want to say to the veterans is when you're transitioning to civilian life, know that there are so many resources available to you and that you are not alone. And while it may feel like especially overwhelming that you're transitioning into this life that you were somewhat a part of but really didn't know, is that you have advocates for you in your local community. And the first place that I want you to go when you're transitioning out or thinking of looking for a new job opportunity is talk to your local county director. You can go onto the Department of Military Affairs website, www.dmva.pa.gov. There you can find a list of any county director in all 67 counties throughout the Commonwealth. In addition, I'd like you to register with the Pennsylvania Veterans Registry. You'll receive regular digest about job opportunities that's specifically targeting you as a veteran and looking because they know what you bring to the table. And for employers, I'd like you to offer in joining that because it's really looking at how to making sure that our men and women that come back, that they're able to continue to flourish and live the lives that they want to lead when they return from service.
It can be a frustrating experience looking for employment. Again, talking about that 25-year-old, you had responsibilities way beyond what most people in the civilian world have. I know that many of you have had responsibility easily. You might have attained the pay grade of E5, being a sergeant or a petty officer in the Navy. I know that you've had responsibility for $25 million of equipment at different points. I know that it's frustrating when you go out into the world and you feel like nobody understands you and you feel like nobody cares about what you did. But I'm going to challenge you on two things. Number one, I want you to stop being entitled. It is your job to translate your experience to the employer. It is not their job to understand you. It is your job to help them understand. So that means you have to make the effort to change the way you speak and the way you approach things, because they're going to actually tell you to smile, which I know you've been told not to. So you need to change some things in the way that you relate to the world if you want to get the job. Number two, I said you feel like people don't care. I'm going to tell you the truth. Many people don't. An employer that's looking at hiring you isn't hiring you because you served your country. They're hiring you because they want you to make money for their company, and you need to accept that and deal with it. The best advice I can have to you is change your mentality and work on transition, because your time in service is over and you need to accept that. It's time to move on. You can still find purpose in this world even after service.
Eric's ambition and dedication to serving veterans is noteworthy. What an inspiring message for employers and job seekers alike. I can't believe we're ready to wrap up tonight's program.
We've covered a lot of information tonight, both beneficial to the job seeker and employer. The recording of tonight's program and listing of available resources and services are available to you on the Chamber's website at scrantonchamber.com. Please reach out to the Chamber staff with any questions you may have. Thank you again to our sponsors, Discover NEPA and Lackawanna College, for helping bring awareness of our workforce programs, resources, and partner services available in Lackawanna County.
On behalf of the Greater Scranton Chamber of Commerce and Skills in Scranton, thank you for joining us this evening. Creating workforce development awareness will bring us one step closer to attracting, growing, and sustaining jobs in Lackawanna County. Have a great night.